Welcome in, everybody. Happy 4th of July week. God bless America. My man Eric Henry and myself, Chip Brown, both of horns247.com, are so excited to be talking to you about all things Texas. We're back after a week of hiatus. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to pack two flagship podcasts into one. You're going to get bonus flagship podcasts today, and we'll still keep it within, an hour. So, E. Henry, you are in Florida. You are in your home state. How are things in Florida, my man?
Chip Brown, what is going on? For the benefit of the producer, we will try to keep this within 60 minutes because then all hell breaks loose otherwise. But we are going to make sure to not leave the folks hanging. We know we left them hanging last week, so we're going to make sure we cover all the ground. We miss the Sunshine State is still sunny, still plenty of athletes down here. I was down in Fort Lauderdale last week, catching up with some family and friends down in my hometown of Tampa. Actually, ironically, I saw Baker Mayfield, ironically enough, a couple days ago, just out and about doing some appearances here in Tampa. So, can't get too far away from football, but no, happy to be back, chopping it up with my man, talking a little Longhorns, because there's been plenty of things that we need to get into since the last time we talked.
Well, we got a lot of football to talk about here. We got, Quinn Ewers and
well. Hang on a second. We got plenty of football. You mentioned Quinn Ewers, Manning Academy. All the things are position proof. We got plenty of football. However, my friend, you broke the news of Jim Scholssnagle's arrival. I was trying to think of some fancy word. He was stolen away in the thief of the night, in the dark of the night, Chip. From rival Texas A&M to Texas. So I can't let you get too far down the football track because you've got to talk about that and let the folks know. Give us the deets about how everything went down.
Yeah, how about that for, Texas is the week that Texas, within 7 days of Texas officially joining the SEC, they kicked things off by taking Texas A&M's baseball coach, 12 hours after he's coaching Texas A&M for the national championship in the College World Series. Unbelievable. And since then, a ton of developments. Schloss comes, does his introductory press conference, brings his entire A&M staff with him. And then A&M decides, we're going to hire your assistant Michael Early to be the head coach at A&M. It did not look like there was going to be room for Troy Tulowitzki on the Schlosnagle staff at Texas. Tulo, who's been so instrumental in helping Texas's hitters in the years that he's been a part of the Texas staff, in 2020 through 22, and then again in 24. Two of those seasons were the best hitting seasons in Texas baseball history in terms of home runs. And so some interesting developments there. And then, Jim Scholssnagle tells the Fort Worth Star-Telegram some interesting tidbits about a conversation he had with A&M athletic director Trev Alberts right before the regional, Eric, that Texas played in down there. And Texas almost beat A&M. Remember, they went extra innings. Yeah. And so Texas, Trev Alberts calls Schloss into a meeting, says, "Are you frustrated?" And Schloss says, "Yeah, frustrated. We're going slow on the renovation of the ballpark, the Bluebell Park. And my sport administrator got fired." And Trev Alberts says, "Well, if you're frustrated, it's okay to move on." Now, again, this is according to Jim Scholssnagle, as quoted by the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And so that's added an interesting layer. Schloss has been busy in the portal. He's going to get Max Ballou back on the roster. I'd say right now, and of course, this podcast will, we're full disclosure as always, we're recording on July 2nd. I'd say right now, little better odds, maybe 70-30 that Texas gets Jalen Flores back, and maybe 40-60 on Jared Thomas, who those are both draft eligible sophomores. So it's been a whirlwind, crazy week with regard to Texas baseball, but Chris Del Conte, that relationship with Jim Scholssnagle dating back to their time at TCU, and the alignment, Eric, of the leadership at Texas, which we'll probably get to here as we move into Texas. And now Texas is officially in the SEC. We probably need to ask everyone out there, Longhorn Nation, are you feeling any different? Do you feel like you have a closer relationship with Toomer's Corners or Bear Bryant? I don't know. But
Chip, really quick, before you go too far, I'll say this. I'll be curious to see what Longhorns fans have to say. But every time I have done radio in Birmingham, I've done radio in New Orleans, I've done radio in Nashville. I'm telling you right now, those folks, all they want to talk about is Texas. So if you're not feeling close to those fan bases, I'm sure you will be pretty soon. Sorry, just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, as Texas becomes official in the SEC on Monday, everyone's talking about the Schloss steal. Texas A&M Schloss is Texas's gain. And then, of course, Quinn Ewers at the Manning Passing Academy was kind of led into this the first time by a reporter about, will Texas be everyone's big game? And then, but Quinn did say it on his own. He said, we're going to be everyone's biggest game for sure, even changing conferences. And that seemed to set off a whole new set of, talk radio debate, social media debate about Texas maybe having an overinflated view of itself. But, and we'll get into that. Eric, do you have a quick thought on that? Because to me, that's a confident quarterback. And yeah, that was kind of the mantra in the Big 12, but Texas, their coach is talking about a national championship this year. So this is a team that should have some confidence.
Chip, you asked for a quick thought. I will make it quick and brief. That's the attitude I want from Texas. That's if I were a Texas fan, Texas player, it's the attitude I want from not only my quarterback, from every player. Because guess what, Chip? No lies detected. Texas is going to be everyone's big game this year. Why run from it?
Right. I mean, they're projected. Our man Brad Crawford at 24/7 Sports has Texas as 11-1 in the regular season, and the only 11-1 team in the SEC. I mean, most are projecting Texas in the top 2 of the SEC with Georgia. I would put Georgia at number 1, but we'll get to the scheduling in the SEC, and if Texas has the schedule to maybe win the SEC in its first year in the league. But let's quickly hit on the SEC celebration that happened on Sunday. SEC Network made it Texas Day. They replayed the Texas-Alabama game. It was quite the tribute. Oklahoma got Monday as Oklahoma Day on SEC Network. And, of course, Longhorn Network has been sunsetted. It's now an app. So look for it in your app store. But I thought it was an unbelievable celebration. And thousands of people down there in front of the tower, the energy, the excitement of going into the SEC. And I thought ESPN, barring their sound issues with their microphones, did a great job of bringing one coach after another onto the set, talking about the transition Texas into the SEC. And Eric, I know Longhorn Nation's feeling a hell of a lot better about this move to the SEC right now than they were 3 years ago when this basically became the news that Texas and Oklahoma were going to be joining the SEC. That was the summer of 2021. That was even before the 5-7 season in year one under Sark. So kudos to Sark for rebuilding this program from the, told Kevin Eltife, Jay Hartzell, Chris Del Conte, got to rebuild the roster, got to get bigger in the trenches, got to get faster on the outside. And he's done that. And now he's got maybe the best quarterback room in the country. And so they are SEC ready now.
Chip, whenever, and I talked about those, radio spots that I've done in various SEC towns, one of the topics of conversation that usually comes up is how do Texas fans feel about the move to the SEC as a whole, not just football, but across the board. And I feel confident, even though I've only been, covering Texas a year, I feel confident in saying this, that I feel that Longhorn fans have to feel much better considering the season that they're coming off of, right? I mean, it's one thing to go into the SEC and all the pomp and circumstance that comes with it and the celebration, which you talked about. And I do have one question about the celebration, but I'll leave that for the end. But what I feel confident in saying is that Texas fans have to feel confident because of the way they close things out in the Big 12 across the board, whether it's women's basketball or softball or, some of the other sports, right? But especially football, closing things out the way they did. Yeah, I don't, there's no doubt in my mind that you have to feel especially confident. And to your point about the roster, and it would have been, borderline malpractice, Chip, for Steve Sarkisian to not start prepping a roster that is SEC ready. And as you talk about, that's playing inside out in the trenches. How many times do we hear Sark talk about big humans? I talked about it after spring game. You asked Sark the question. I can't remember what you asked him verbatim, but you asked him the question about the defensive line depth, and he gave the answer that he gave. Then I followed up and said, hey, essentially when Sark said that, we talk about feeling good with the starters, but not with the next line guys, I followed up and asked him about that, and he said not enough big humans, right? Well, now certainly he's got that across the offensive line. You definitely have to see what's going to come of the defensive line. We just published our edge preview, and you feel confident about the edges. We'll see what happens with the interior of the defensive line. But all across this roster, there's no doubt in my mind. You go top to bottom, position by position. There isn't a position in my mind on this roster that you don't feel you at least have a player or multiple players that are quote unquote SEC types of talents. And then you got some guys who you feel might be top of the heap type SEC talents. I'm on the record of saying that I think Quinn Ewers is the best quarterback in the SEC week one, the day he walks in. You flip in you talk about a guy like Anthony Hill, who's, an athletic freak, guys like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. So I'll give you a chance to talk about that, but I'd be remiss, Chip, if I didn't at least mention, because one of the talking points, certainly of the SEC celebration, the lovely Elle Brown, I'm sure she went just to see Pitbull. So hopefully that went over like a charm with the folks there in Austin.
Yeah, you couldn't get close to Pitbull if you didn't have, some VIP access. So it was mayhem. Elle Bell did not have a media credential, but there was great energy, and you know what, Pitbull was the right guy for that. And I thought Kevin Eltife stole the show. My man, former Texas Senator, chairman of the Regents Board, Tyler, Mr. Tyler, Texas. And he's up there saying, we need you at DKR and Moody and Dish Falk. Come find me. I'll buy you a beer. We'll put it on Del Conte's tab. And then he starts quoting Pitbull. He's like, I need you tonight. I need everyone tonight because we might not have tomorrow. And we might wake up with a headache, but at least we'll be in the SEC. I thought it was great. And then Sankey comes up. Sankey's like, all right, which is, whatever, cliche, silly, but on point. And then he's talking about I realize I'm the only thing standing between you and Pitbull. So welcome to the SEC. And then, Pitbull takes it away. So, yeah, I thought it was good energy. They had drones, they had fireworks. They did it right. It was a big event. It felt big. And so kudos to Texas for their event, for ESPN for having the SEC network on site and pulling it all together. Now, let's get back to there were some interesting comments, made at that SEC celebration. The biggest one to me was Steve Sarkisian talking about the alignment, because that does apply back to Jim Scholssnagle too. And I have this to say, Eric, to Longhorn Nation, and I'll say it over and over again. Savor these days, because alignment is hard to achieve from the top down at a university. It just is. It depends, it depends on if you have the right people in charge. Are they looking out for the greater good of your university, or are they letting ego and personal fiefdoms get in the way? At Texas, we saw the alignment totally break down after DeLoss Dodds, retired as athletic director. All the coaches that DeLoss hired, Mac Brown, Rick Barnes, Augie Garrido, who went on to have that golden decade in the first 10 years of the 2000s. When all that started to crumble, DeLoss Dodds retires, Mac Brown gets fired, Rick Barnes gets pushed out, Augie Garrido gets pushed out, Steve Patterson is in, the Grim Reaper, the worst athletic director in the history of major college sports. It was a disaster. And Longhorn Nation shouldn't forget those days, because it was rough. And the people who were smart bought season tickets then, because you buy low. And now those tickets are worth every penny. And not every school has this alignment. Just look at A&M. I mean, their chancellor, John Sharp, who is basically the A&M president. I don't care what anyone says. He is, he announced his retirement on Monday. A coincidence that that's the day Texas is coming into the SEC, and he's the one who leaked the scoop to the Houston Chronicle about Texas and Oklahoma trying to come to the SEC 3 years ago to try to, swing votes against letting Texas and Oklahoma in. It didn't work. John Sharp looked silly then, and he had other issues, and he hasn't been able to keep a president, and he fires Jimbo Fisher and is going to pay him $76.7 million. Their alignment is off. Texas alignment is on. Savor these days, because it matters. It's how you get facilities built. It's how you get your NIL. Texas One Fund has a partnership with William Morris Endeavor. William Morris Endeavor is out hustling major corporations to support Texas One Fund. These are forward-thinking ideas that happen when everybody's pulling in the same direction. And so that to me was the biggest thing out of the SEC celebration, Eric. And I know, we've got a lot of football to get into. You've got position previews. You've been doing a great job on the schedule previews of the opponents. I think we've got Michigan. I want to ask you about Michigan and UTSA, because I think those are, we talked about Colorado State last time, but let's start there. We'll also get into some position previews that we've been combining forces on here on at Horns 24/7. And don't forget, we got a July 4th special going on right now, 50% off promo to become an annual member, and all kinds of breaking news about Texas baseball, who's coming, who's going. We've got Eric's, position previews and schedule previews. I'm doing a top 22 player ranking countdown. So make sure that you get in on this while the getting is good, Eric. Let's start with your schedule preview of Michigan, because, Quinn Ewers was asked about how tough has it been to try to get on the same page with all these newcomers. And he said, it's tough, but we're doing it. They got to get on the same page, Eric, because they're going to face the defending national champs on September 7th.
Chip, a lot to get into. So I'm just going to kind of high level it here. My two big takeaways from the Michigan preview. One, the amount of talent that Michigan lost offensively. And we all knew, Jim Harbaugh left and JJ McCarthy. Blake Corum. The list goes on with the amount of guys they lost offensively. However, you have to think when you have Sharon Moore as your head coach, someone who was an offensive line coach, is going to bring a measure of attitude. Even if you take a look at Michigan last year, Chip, not the most explosive running team, but by God, they ran it. Their top two guys, and Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum, probably combined with somewhere around 5.5 yards per carry, which is not a bad number, but it's not topping 6.5, 7. Donovan Edwards, I think, averaged something like 4.5 yards per carry last year in kind of that reserve role. He obviously will step into the starting role, which leads into my second point. We're going to find out very early on. This is my opinion. We're going to find out very early on what Texas's 2024 run defense is like, because I think that Michigan's going to say, hey, we're going to take the air out of the football a little bit. We know you got a quarterback in Quinn Ewers who is a third-year starter and has talents like Matt Golden and Isaiah Bond and Silas Bolden, et cetera. No, we're going to limit possessions. We're going to run the football. We're going to test to see that your big defensive tackles and Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, they're off in the NFL now. Let's see what you got. Can you play physical football 4 quarters, something that obviously Texas had to do at times last year, test them and see what happens. So I think those are the two things. And I think the third thing we'll get an early test is, Chip, I said it a ton of times last year, there is going to be a time in that ball game, Chip, where it is 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1 or a goal line situation, and Texas has got to get up there and run the football. I would love to see early on, the Longhorns establish some attitude, some identity, and say, hey, our short yardage woes from 2022 and 2023, our goal line woes from 2023, put those things behind them, go into the big house and establish an attitude about yourself. So those are really my big takeaways. When I take a look at the Michigan team and what's returning, those are the things that are kind of my takeaways as far as what could be an early preview of what that game will look like.
Yeah. I've said, I think if you're seeing Michigan's offensive linemen getting to the second level, getting to the linebackers, there's reason for concern, because that was not happening last year. And, Michigan has 3 senior offensive linemen who may not have been starters last year, but they've been in the program, and a junior, and Donovan Edwards. And like you said, Sharon Moore, who ran it 32 straight times to finish off Penn State last year in a 24-15 game. It wasn't like Michigan was up by 21. They just imposed their will on a team that, is a team that some people are looking at this year as a college football playoff team. Penn State, I'm talking about. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a great early test for Texas's run defense and defense in general. And for, they've got playmakers at every level coming back. They may not have all the playmakers they had on that defense, but, they've got Kenneth Grant, they got Mason Graham, they've got a couple of linebackers who are really talented. One's a transfer from Maryland who can run. Will Johnson in the secondary, he commands that group. They have a starting safety back. So I just think people who, and look, if Texas is totally on point like they were at Alabama, yeah, then Texas probably covers the 9.5. I just thought that was a big line for this game, but I think it's going to be a great early season test.
No doubt about it. I just shook my head vigorously because when you were talking about the kid from Maryland, his name's escaping me right now. But when I had a chance to dive into some of his PFF numbers, big athletic linebacker who can make plays in space. So he certainly, while Michigan certainly lost some guys on their defense, and his name is escaping me right now. I should look it up, but definitely a playmaker. Someone's going to step in and start.
Yeah. Farrar, is that?
Yeah. It's kind of it's a very specific name there.
It's Jayshon. Oh, Jayshon Barham.
Barham. There we go. Yeah. I knew it was like Jai and then Sean. Yeah.
And Ernest Hausman, who has been in the program, and of course Will Johnson, and then Makari Page at safety. Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good test. And then Eric, you finish off. You play Michigan, and then you come home and you play UTSA. And UTSA, Jeff Traylor, all that guy does is contend for, American Athletic Conference, or I'll just say conference championships. It doesn't matter what conference he's in. He's always in the mix. And then you look at their roster and, there's Kendrick Blackshire, former Longhorn linebacker, and Denver Harris, former 5-star corner. Jeff Traylor, he just always seems to have dudes.
Oh, look, there's ever since, and I'm going to try not to make this the UTSA podcast, but I was covering Conference USA when former LSU assistant Frank Wilson was running that program, and things were not good at all, quite frankly. Jeff Traylor takes it over immediately. He gets some studs and Frank Harris and Rashad Wisdom and Sincere McCormick, guys who are all in the NFL outside of Frank Harris, who now is just being Mr. San Antonio down there. And like you said, all they do is contend for conference titles. You talk about the players they have on this year's roster. They've loaded up at the running back position. Definitely have guys to keep an eye on, specifically Kavarian Barnes and others. Something else I would say to keep an eye on is the quarterback position, Chip. It's going to be two-headed competition there. Eddie Lee Marburger, who was kind of the heir apparent, but also they get Josh McCown's son, Owen McCown, who comes in and is now in the program as well, comes in from Colorado, right? So we'll see what happens there. Again, if this Texas team, quite frankly, if this Texas team is as good as we believe it is, this won't be much of a contest. But they do have some guys to keep an eye on, as you mentioned, Kendrick Blackshire and others. And like you said, Jeff Traylor is a winner, and that in of itself, always means you have to take them seriously.
Yeah. That'll be a little test. I mean, when they played in 2022, Jeff Traylor emptied everything. He was doing onside kick and double pass, and that was a one possession game deep into the third quarter, Eric. It was a tipped ball pick six by Jahdae Barron that finally put some distance, between the two teams. It ended up being, it looked like a comfortable win, but it was kind of reminiscent of the Wyoming game last year. Texas goes to Alabama, wins a big one, comes home, plays Wyoming. That game was 10-7 in the third quarter. So again, Quinn Ewers said at the Manning Passing Academy, he was asked for the strengths of the team, and he said, fourth quarter and culture. Okay. Fourth quarter and culture. That's what you want to hear if you're Longhorn Nation, because they're going to have to finish games and they're going to have to improve the red zone offense, but we'll continue to feed on that as our summer goes along here. Okay. So in terms of, and I had a insider, and I think I don't know how much we touched on with Johnny Nansen, but, talked to Marquise Tuiasosopo, who worked with Johnny Nansen and Steve Sarkisian at Washington. And, Marquise just said Nansen is relentless. And he's been involved in all the the big time defensive spring portal transfers, Bill Norton from Arizona, Jermaine Lole from Louisville, and Javion Cole from San Jose State. And I know people listening to this are like, well, why doesn't he make sure that they get Riley Pettijohn, the high school, one of the top linebackers in the country, who is expected to make an announcement, I think, July 6th. And it may not be trending in Texas's favor at the moment, but schools are throwing NIL money around like this is the last season of their lives. Eric, we'll touch on that as well. But Johnny Nansen, the guy is just relentless in terms of his ability to recruit, his ability to coach. And one of the things I found interesting, a source said, he's going to be creative in the way that he uses Anthony Hill, and he's going to be creative in how he deploys his linebackers, but specifically Anthony Hill. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. He's worked with Pete Kwiatkowski in the past. There's trust there. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. And I was going to move on to the position previews, the offensive line and the edge, unless you want to, add in on Johnny Nansen.
No, we got plenty of ground to cover. So go ahead.
Yeah. So let's start. You did a position preview, obviously, on the offensive line. We were talking about that, the importance of, this offense being a well-oiled machine, 4 starters back in the offensive line. Take it away.
So I am cautiously optimistic, Chip, with this offensive line that let's just call a spade a spade. Underwhelming in pass protection at times. And part of that, Chip, as we know, was the fact that teams seemingly threw out their entire playbook. You can only prepare so much for something when you watch film and you're expecting one thing from a team, and then they come out and they're running an entirely different defense, right? And how many times we heard that last year? Kelvin Banks or Jake Majors or Hayden Conner say, yeah, well, they did some things that we didn't see on film, whether it was the Joker front or, moving the Bucks around, this, that, and the other. That is, I appreciate the honesty, of course, someone who covers this team, but with the level of talent and level of continuity amongst the offensive line, you would like to see that improve. That's one aspect of it, especially this is now a 3rd year. I mean, Jake Majors, 4 years, as a starter, Hayden Conner. These are all vets. These are all guys who've played a lot of time together. So whether it's from a communication aspect, you'd like to see that improve. So I say cautiously optimistic. In the run game, you had to be impressed. Again, big humans. DJ Campbell, his first year at starter, certainly was a bit of up and down year at times, but a guy was a big road grader in terms of his physical frame, 6'3", 330-something pounds. Hayden Conner's a big boy. Jake Majors is a big boy. You look at that right tackle spot, you feel pretty confident it's going to be Cam Williams, who's all 6'4", 6'5", 360, another big boy. And I think, Chip, why I'm cautiously optimistic on Cam Williams, remember that when he came in and played, when Christian Jones couldn't go, my memory serves me correct, was that Kansas State or BYU? Kansas State, right? Cam Williams had a hell of a ball game at right tackle that day against one of the better defensive teams you're going to face in the Big 12. That level of talent up front leaves me very optimistic about what they're going to be able to do. I always knock on wood in terms of what's behind them. It's not lacking talent, but it is lacking experience outside of Cole Hudson, right? Of course, was a starter in 2022 and someone who can come in and play a variety of spots in the interior of the offensive line. You don't have a lot of experience, whether it's, Gooseby or Daniel Cruz or, guys like those, Umazulu and others who, you just don't have a ton of experience there. So you hope that everyone stays healthy and the continuity is there, but cautious optimism is what I'm rolling with this offensive line group, because everything else is there. The size, the talent, the time played together. But they're going to get tested week in and week out in the SEC.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to, you mentioned Gooseby, who's right now would be the backup to Kelvin Banks at left tackle. In a pinch, Hayden Connor would move from left guard to right tackle if something happened to Cam Williams, but you've got Andre Kojo over there. But the guys to keep an eye on are Brandon Baker and Daniel Cruz, right? I mean, they're the future. You don't want the future to be now. You want them to have that year in the weight room, the full off season. Offensive linemen need time to cook unless you're Kelvin Banks. So yeah, Steve Sarkisian feels like this is one of the best and deepest positions on the team. And that is welcome news for Texas fans, because my God, from 2008, when Tony Hills was drafted, until 2018, when Connor Williams was drafted, Texas had no offensive lineman drafted in 7 rounds. People want to know why Texas fell off the map? There you go. You got to win in the trenches. So future looks bright on the offensive line, and they were able to hold on to guys. I was a little surprised, Eric. I thought, they lost Jaden or oh God.
Come on, from Orlando, the big tackle. Why am I having a brain fart now too? Not Jaden Chapman.
Peyton Kirkland.
Thank you, Peyton Kirkland. Dr. Phillips.
Peyton Kirkland. Did he go to Oregon?
Yes.
Jesus, Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are going for it, man. But yeah, I mean, I think they held on to guys when it looked like maybe some guys would get a little impatient, and or Colorado. Sorry, Peyton Kirkland went to Colorado.
I wasn't sure if it was Colorado. I wasn't sure. That's on me. I thought it was Colorado. That's why I had that look, but I wasn't sure. I mean, yeah. Dion certainly any offensive lineman you can find. But go ahead, Chip.
Yeah, Peyton Kirkland to Colorado. Sorry about that. But they held on to Andre Kojo and Jaden Chapman, and those guys need to keep coming. So, but overall, offensive line, deep and you got some experience. And I think, the sort of calamity we saw in the Red River game last year when Jake Majors goes down with that high ankle sprain pretty early in the game, and Cole Hudson was out with a knee injury. You had to bring in Connor Robertson. Now you've got Jake Majors, Cole Hudson. You got Hayden Connor who can snap it. You got, Daniel Cruz. You got depth at that center position. So the other position preview that you just put out, the edge, and another deep group because of some offseason additions.
Chip, I think there's a clear consensus across, the board, whether it's me, you, Jeff Howe. We all are high on this edge group. And as you talked about, they bring in a Trey Moore. And let's just run down the list, right? Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke, those are your bookends there at Jack and on the edge. And here's my thing with Sorrell. I feel that some of the conversation I see around him was that, he wasn't making plays behind the line of scrimmage and his counting stats were down from 2022. Well, let's take into consideration he was playing alongside the top 2 defensive tackles in the nation all year who are wreaking havoc. And at that point, you got to understand that those guys are going to make some plays. And yes, not everything is going to come your direction, but also, Chip, teams weren't running the football. Your opportunities to make certain plays as far as your counting stats tackles are going to go down when teams are abandoning the run game pretty early on. So there's that. And in terms of the pass rush, it definitely was a sum of all parts kind of deal there in terms of the interior pass rush with Sweat and Murphy, opportunities for guys like Jalen Ford to linebacker blitz, guys like Anthony Hill to linebacker blitz. But Barron Sorrell, I'm expecting him to take another step in his development. I know you and I are both really high on Ethan Burke. I'll leave you room to talk about him and just all of the potential you see from him in terms of his frame, and a guy who toughed out a knee injury last year. But with the depth, Jet Bush is the pass rush specialist. He is now gone. No disrespect to the great Jet Bush, but you have to think that Trey Moore is a bit of an upgrade in terms of someone who will fill that role. Trey Moore is a guy who could push for even a starting role if this wasn't a year and you're bringing back two veteran defensive ends. Justice Finkley plays his role very well. Justice Finkley may never round into a starter, but certainly a reliable rotational guy. Colin Simmons, he's a 5-star talent, a guy who can just deploy. We've talked about it a little bit. I expect him to be kind of this year's Anthony Hill, where it's let's not overload him. Let's not give him too much, but just do the thing that you can do well. Use your athletic ability. Go find the quarterback. You have that as well. We haven't even touched on Colton Vasek, who, was a guy who seemingly was turning some heads in camp last year. The back injury slows him down. Now he's got a full year to really kind of develop himself and his frame. He could be
Baby Bosa.
Baby Bosa could be a bit of a sleeper as well. Haven't even gotten to, guys like, Jamon Tapp, who played some reserve snaps last year. So this group, top to bottom, Chip, whenever I talk about this edge spot in my mind, I think they have the opportunity to have the type of breakout year to spearhead the defensive line in the same way that the defensive tackles did last year, Chip.
Yeah. And you look at, and I'll catch you on Jamon Tapp real quick. He moved on to Arizona State, but you've got Zena.
Sorry, I misspoke on Tapp. Yeah.
Zena Umazulu, younger brother of Neto Umazulu. And you and I saw him in the spring, that length, that arm length. They're finding guys with length, and that is big time. Yeah. Ethan Burke, to me, is a guy who's going to have an NFL decision on his hands at the end of the year. That guy he's just scratching the surface. We know he came from lacrosse. His dad, just a savage lacrosse player. And Ethan Burke with an 83-inch wingspan. That length, they're going to move him inside, Eric. They've got a rabbits package with Ethan Burke inside, Barron Sorrell inside, and Colin Simmons and Trey Moore on the outside. And we'll see. Ethan Burke with those long arms, swatting passes. And so I think this edge position is hugely upgraded. And we heard Steve Sarkisian, as you mentioned, at the end of the spring, he said, our pass rush is real. You didn't see it in the spring game, but our pass rush is real. And that's big time, because we know Texas was doing really well in quarterback pressures last year with Byron Murphy, with Tavondre Sweat playing a big role in that. But now you have, Trey Moore, who we'll see. You and I have talked about his numbers: 14 sacks, American Athletic Conference Defensive Player of the Year. Sarkisian really likes Trey Moore, feels like he's blue collar, that he brings this chip on his shoulder. I can't wait to see it. We didn't see much of him at all in the spring game. And Colin Simmons, everyone I've talked to says the guy is a freak, that he's got bend and that ability to, carry weight while rounding the corner, can sharpen those corners, get to the quarterback, has great instincts of, where to find the quarterback. And the last great pass rusher we saw as a freshman, Tony Brackens, back in 93, went on to, the Jacksonville Jaguars, was a Pro Bowler until my man Flozell Adams of the Cowboys chopped his knee and ended his career, basically. Thanks a lot, Flozell. But I want to see if that's what we're talking about here. Because it sure sounds like it when you talk to team sources, when we talk to players coming out of the spring. So yeah, this is an exciting aspect of the defense with those pass rushers and Anthony Hill. You can really you can create some serious havoc with all three of those guys on the field together. So that's exciting. And again, get over to Horns 24/7. Got the 50% off promo, 4th of July special. Eric's got, we're all, cranking out little aspects of these position previews, and it's a hearty meal to digest, and there's more coming. Eric, we've also got to talk about Arthur Kaluma, little Texas basketball. So Kansas State 6'7" forward Arthur Kaluma signs a scholarship agreement with Texas, and everyone was like, "Oh, what's Texas gonna do in the front court?" They lost Dylan Mitchell, they lost Dylan DeZoo. They retained Caden Shedrick, they retained Zarek Onyema. We're hearing great things about Devin Pryor, who redshirted last year, but I mean, my God, the way they're talking about Devin Pryor, it's like, oh, he can hit the open three. He's more athletic than Brock Cunningham, blah, blah, blah. Your thoughts on Arthur Kaluma and his, what was it? 14 points,
14.7 boards. Yeah, 14.4 points, a little over 7 boards last year, Chip. And forgive me for misspeaking. I was thinking of Billy Walton. I don't know why I said Jamon Tapp, so sorry about that there. But I know we're going to get into this a little bit and take it or leave it. Chip, Arthur Kaluma, solid Big 12 player, better than the alternative, right? So definitely needed him. I am a little skeptical just because at 6'7" he doesn't solve all of Texas's problems in the post. However, Chip, if the concept is we're going to get a bunch of athletic wings, all right, I can rock with that. Like RT, let's see what you and Steve McLean, who is the kind of the architect of the defense. Frank Haith obviously handles the offense. I can, if that's the thought, I'm willing to buy in and see what that could look like, right? But that does still put a measure of the post work on a Caden Shedrick, who we need to stay healthy for an entire year. And, a Zarek Onyema, we'll see what happens there. So it's wait and see. But again, I think the big thing, Chip, that I would like to bounce off you, and this may be way more time than we have. If the move, and I've heard numbers of what it took to get Arthur Kaluma. I don't have a solid number here to report. However, if we were going to do Arthur Kaluma, just pony up and get JT Toppin, right? Like that's where my thought kind of lands there. However, can't cry over spilled milk. Arthur Kaluma is here. And as someone who's seen him play up close, Big 12 tournament, luckily I was gifted, by longtime SID Scott McConnell, one of those floor seats. So I had a chance to watch Arthur Kaluma up close. I mean, he is a long kid. He does some things real well. You take a look at some of his advanced numbers and where he plays. Not necessarily someone who is a deadly three-point shooter, Chip, but he can stretch the floor, will take threes, can play in the post as well. Just, again, at 6'7", it's not exactly a true big. But if the idea is we're going to get a bunch of wings and see what we can do, I'm willing to take a wait and see approach.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard JT Toppin got 1.5 mil from Tech, which I guess averages, he has 3 years of eligibility remaining. So I guess that averages out to 500,000 per season. The NIL money is crazy right now. It really is. We're seeing it in recruiting. I'll defer to Hank and our man Hank South and Jordan Scruggs on that. But the NIL players, Texas Tech has Cody Campbell, Double Eagle, in the oil and gas, and he's determined to get his Red Raiders, where they want to be. They got Micah Hudson, and we're seeing Oregon, Ohio State, OU. They paid big money for Dominic Williams, the TCU defensive tackle. Heck, even A&M, they're paying big NIL money to keep their baseball players. And they just, Jace Laviolette and Gavin Grahovic just announced they're staying at A&M. And I think Jim Scholssnagle probably thought those guys were coming with him to Texas. But A&M shelling out in the portal. And we know in recruiting over the weekend, Josiah Sharma, who looked like he was headed for Texas, suddenly commits to Oregon. Now, I'm not going to get into that yet because it's not over till signing day in December, and a ton can happen. The whole football season's going to happen before the regular season anyway, before those kids have to sign. But it is something. I mean, if you're an interior defensive lineman right now coming out of high school or in the portal, it is, and you've got an aggressive agent, things are good for you. But yeah, it's, obviously Rodney Terry's got to get this group to come together. He told me at SEC meetings in the spring in Destin, feels like he's got a backcourt that will compete with anyone's, with Julie and Larry, who, by the way, they're so impressed with his leadership. And Jason Kent, both of those guys, from Jason Kent, the 6'8" forward from Indiana State, those guys have emerged as leaders. That's good because someone's got to lead. And Jordan Pope, of course, can handle point guard duties, play off the ball. You got Tremont Mark, who's a talented wing who can 6'6", can defend. You got Kendall Weaver. What I like, Eric, is that if you're going to be a bunch of 6'7" guys and play that kind of positionless basketball, they got to be great defenders, because then you're putting pressure on the other team. You're turning them over and you're getting out and running, and you're really hard to handle. So if that's the case, great. Because that's the one area of the program that has slipped from the Chris Beard era, but Texas has gotten better offensively. They were Beard was a little bit stifling on the offensive end, because of his, complete focus on defense. All right. Good stuff there. You ready for some take it or leave it, Eric?
Absolutely, CB.
All right. We'll come right back with your favorite part of the show. Take it or leave it. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on. All right, Eric, who is serving first? And
Chip,
take it or leave it.
You are serving to me first, CB.
Okay. You, Eric Henry, agree with Quinn Ewers when he said at the Manning Passing Academy last week, after flying with Arch Manning on his Nicholas Air private jet as part of his new Nicholas Air NIL deal. That was nice of Quinn to include Arch Manning in his private jet hours. But anyway, at the Manning Passing Academy, you agree with Quinn Ewers when he said Texas will be everyone's biggest game on the schedule, even changing conferences. Take it or leave it.
I'm taking it, Chet. Listen, Texas comes with a level of name recognition that there are very few programs in the nation that can achieve that. And we know that people look at the burnt orange and they have, there are no indifferent feelings about Texas. It's either strong one way or strong the other. And as I said earlier in the show, the fact that Quinn Ewers is acknowledging that fact, I want the whole team to acknowledge that fact, that we play for Texas and people want to knock us off. So yes, there's no doubt I'm taking it.
I agree. And I want that confidence. And you're right. Texas is like the Yankees, the Lakers, Notre Dame. You either love them or you hate them. No matter what, you're paying attention to them. And Quinn Ewers knows it, and he's ready. Sounds to me like he's ready to back it up. So I agree. Take it or leave it, number two.
Take it or leave it, number two. Texas owes someone at the SEC a year's worth of steak dinners and real steak dinners, at a premier steakhouse for the Horns SEC schedule in 2024. Take it or leave it, Chip Brown.
You know what? I'm taking this because I mean, if you look at Texas's SEC schedule, the Longhorns only played 2 of the top 8 teams, or the teams projected in the top 8. And, those 8 teams being Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, Tennessee, and OU. And Oklahoma, by contrast, plays 6 of those teams. They play Tennessee, Ole Miss, at Missouri, at LSU, in addition to playing Texas and Alabama. So, I mean, Texas, come on. You got a break. Only Missouri has 2 of those projected top 8 teams on the schedule. Eric, what say you?
I am absolutely taking this. I have been adamant, Chip, from the moment this schedule dropped, that if expectations were not high enough with Texas entering the SEC, they should have been even higher when you take a look at the schedule. No Ole Miss, no Missouri, no Tennessee, no Bama, no LSU. It is put up or shut up time for the Longhorns. They get, again, I'm not saying it's a cakewalk of a schedule, but they need to thank the SEC schedule makers, and yes, buy them a year's worth of steak dinners for this one, because this schedule is set up for success for Texas to walk into the SEC year one and make an impact, Chip.
All right, take it or leave it. Number 3, Eric, Kansas State 6'7" transfer forward Arthur Kaluma fills Texas's holes in the front court. Take it or leave it.
Again, leaving it, it doesn't, he is not a guy who's going to be a big, I would have loved to seen Texas get a Brandon Garrison, right? A big 7-footer who, it can be a rim protector. He is a very, I want to make this clear, a very good basketball player that Texas needed to help with this roster construction, but he doesn't fill the hole in the front court. But I am intrigued to see what Rodney Terrell will be able to do with these big athletic wings. So I'm leaving it, Chip.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it as well. The guys who can fill the holes in Texas's front court are guys like Nick Cody, if he can get healthy. And he will get healthy. He's recovering. He suffered an injury, late in his senior year of high school. And Jamie Vinson, the 6'11" center from Oak Hill Academy, who signed with Texas late. They got to coach him up. They got to get those guys in there, let those big bodies bang, and show that they're the heir apparent to Caden Shedrick. All right, look at us, Eric. We jammed 2 episodes of the Flagship podcast into one. We're here for you. And don't forget to get over to Horns 24/7. Take advantage of that 50% off promo for annual membership. You're going to get Paramount Plus. You're going to get VIP access to all the team sites. And you're going to get us, our inside scoop and intel, the great recruiting coverage of Hank South and Jordan Scruggs. Come on. Horns 24/7 is on fire. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Flagship podcast. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Everybody have a great 4th of July. Hope you're enjoying the SEC so far. Until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.